Hello, everybody. We are back for some more, mental observation skills. That's what we're working on this month. So today we're going to talk about beliefs. We're going to talk about how beliefs are formed, how to observe them, why it matters, and, what to do about beliefs, right? Okay, so last week we talked about thoughts, right? Now, my perspective is that the mind kind of just interacts with thoughts. While we can have thoughts about ourselves, or while we can interact, or we can have thoughts that are often very similar, I find the thoughts are just kind of there in the mental realm, and the mind is what engages with the thought or disengages with the thought. Now, when we have an experience, right? And when we have an experience in our lives, the mind is also going to try to give meaning to that experience, especially if it was a really good experience or a really hard experience. And what can happen there, or if we hear the same thoughts over and over and over again, if we're always engaging with the same kind of patterning of thoughts, is those thoughts kind of create, like, when I think about beliefs, they're more like a structure. It's almost like a brick wall made up of many, many different similar evidence points of like one main belief structure. All right, so I find that there's really three ways that we build these belief structures in the mind. So one is going to be the meanings based on experiences. So things that we saw is true, right? So we had the truth of an experience, and then we put that into a belief structure. All right. Now those tend to be, when I'm working with clients, the ones that almost always need to come down. Not almost, it depends on what the belief structure is. But if it's a negative belief structure based on something that happened in the past, that we gave a meaning to, right? So let me give you a story to ground this. So let's just say you're 5 years old, your mom's having a bad day, you're at the grocery store, you say, hey, can I have some gummy bears? She says no, and you ask again, and she says no again, and you ask a third, fourth, fifth time, and you are at your little kid wit's end at the checkout line, and there's the little bag of gummy bears, and it's so much smaller than the big gummy bears, and you put all your hope and dreams into this ask, and then she gets so fed up with you that she gives you a little smack and says, stop it and don't ask me again. Like, stop it and don't ask me again. Now, some kids might be like, my mom's having a really bad day here, and then not make that mean anything about them. Some other kids may find that they take that on and they say, oh, I'm never going to ask for anything again because it doesn't matter. I never get what I want. Now, you start looking for evidence for that belief structure. One, it will be true. And two, it'll be really, really problematic for you in your life. And literally so much of what holds people back in their businesses is literally like the beliefs that come from very small stories like this. Like sometimes it's just like, oh, I had an old boss that told me X, Y, Z, and I just believed it was true, and I started to see evidence of it. Now, like I said in last week's episode, thoughts are attractive to other thoughts that are similar too, right? So if I start thinking a thought, it's going to attract other thoughts that are of similar nature. So if I start keeping these thoughts in my mind, right? So if I have a wall that I'm starting to build out of these like little bricks of stories, the universe and myself, we're both going to be building the rest of this wall together. The universe is going to be like, oh, because that's a point of attraction, and then what this is called from a neuroscience standpoint is cognitive bias, right? So if I believe something's true, I'm always going to be looking for more and more evidence of it and putting more and more bricks on that belief structure, right? And so sometimes we have a belief structure that's not that big of a deal, and sometimes we have a belief structure that is like the Great Wall of China. Okay, so that's one way how we can get a belief, is we can have a meaning given to us based on an experience, right? Now, the next way that we can create a belief structure is we're just going to be thinking the same thoughts over and over and over again, right? So let's just say that you grew up in scarcity, chaos, whatever else. And the thoughts of, I'm not going to have enough money, or we're not going to have enough money, right? Were around all the time. Those were really common thoughts. You could pick up the stress from your parents or whoever, whatever else. Those are thoughts that we can then start to believe over time. So it wasn't like one big experience, but more just like those thoughts coming over and over and over again. Now, I notice in those cases, people do quite a bit of, when we pick on ourselves, we can do quite a bit of damage with the thoughts over and over again. All right. So which actually leads me to my third set of beliefs, which is really around, it's kind of like point two, but it's around our self-conception. It's how we see ourselves. And so since we're always with ourselves, if we believe that, if we believe that we're smart, we're going to find evidence that we're smart. We're going to start having belief structures that we're smart. we're going to start seeing evidence that we're smart. If we see beliefs, if our self-conception is that I'm not good enough, we're going to see 1,000 different ways we're not good enough. So what you believe to be true is true. Like what you believe to be true, it's not objectively true, but it is for sure true in your experience. All right, so the ways that we can start to observe beliefs are tricky because some of them you can hear in the conscious mind. You could say to yourself, oh, I believe this or I believe that. And sometimes they're deeper, sometimes they're in the subconscious, and you may not be able to necessarily hear them real easy. So sometimes when I'm listening to clients talk, I will hear their words bump up against their belief structures by what didn't get said, by the implications, by the assumptions of what didn't get said. Now, I'm going to just tell you, sometimes you're going to need a practitioner, especially somebody that's versed in mindset, to be able to help with this. Seeing into your own subconscious, especially if you don't have practice with it, can be hard. It can be hard. It can be something that can be a little bit frustrating. So if you've never done any work in the subconscious mind, you're probably going to need to work with a practitioner to kind of see what it's like while you're being led, and then you'll be more able to do it on your own, right? Like I've had many, many coaches that taught me how, and you can see what they're doing and you can see what it feels like when you're in the experience, and then you have more ability to do it on your own. But I just want to set what we're talking about here. It's not super advanced work, but it does require you to be able to do all of what we talked about in the first episode in November pretty effectively. All right. So if you can't do those things yet, then you might need a practitioner for belief structure work. All right. When I'm listening to clients, so when I'm working, so it's like people are not coming to see me because everything is usually super, super awesome. Usually people are getting in their own way around something. They want to make $1 million, but they're stuck at, 550, right? They want to be able to hold big success, but they're not there yet. Once you can see a belief structure, once you can understand it's there, why it's there, sometimes understand how long it's been there, whatever else, this is the place where you can start to question whether or not it's true. Now, I want to say something about truth here that I think is really important. So there is subjective truth, that like an experience that I went through. And then there's like truth. Now, let's just say, for example, I grew up and my family never went on family vacations. So I have an experience that vacations are basically impossible because I didn't see them as possible. I have an experience that vacations are expensive. I have an experience that vacations are just not a top priority. Now, all of that's true because that is my real lived experience. Now, is that the entirety of truth? Absolutely not. Like some people go on vacations multiple times a year, shop around and get the best deals on vacation. Some people of all income levels get to travel, however it is that they can afford, or as often as whatever else. And so it's tricky. This is tricky because sometimes when we're looking at our mind, the mind might resist making changes here because we're like, but this is true. We know this is true. We definitely went through this. Now, this is the place though where you have to choose. You have to say, well, that was true for me and I definitely did experience that, but now I want something else. So this belief structure can't be here anymore, because if I believe that it's true that vacations are impossible and expensive and hard to do and XYZ, I'm never going to get to go because I'm always going to find that truth to match that belief structure. So this is the place where we have to start to question this and start to bring in other variations of truth. And I find that really, truly one of the fastest ways to move belief structures is to prove that it wasn't true. And this is why we have to be but we also have to be gentle with ourselves, because what we're not doing is we're not saying, well, you didn't experience this. That will not work, because the mind will be like, no, we definitely went through this, and kind of protect that belief structure. But if you're like, no, we went through this and we had this experience, but there is 10,000 experiences of vacations available, and I want a different one. And what we believe here to be true is. And so this was true, but I don't want this to be true moving forward, right? So we have to kind of break the truth down from there in that way. All right. Now, also, when you believe something to be true, you're always going to be finding more and more evidence of it, right? If you find yourself adding to belief structures that you find they're problematic, stop doing that. You'll have to learn to redirect your thoughts, so that way we're not adding fuel to the fire. Now, belief structures about self-conception are going to be some of the most important when it comes to money, when it comes to wealth, when it comes to success, when it comes to it's not just those things. It could also be love, like all the flavors of abundance. So how you see yourself, your self-conception pretty much dictates how worthy you feel, dictates how deserving you feel, dictates how much permission you give yourself to be, do, have what you want. So if you are having a life that's smaller or more constricted than you want, chances are you're going to have to really, really look at how the stories, the belief structures that you have about yourself. And so, again, some of these are going to be hard to see because they're going to be old. They're going to be old. They're going to be belief structures that you put in place when you were 2, 3, 4, 5 years old. Sometimes you'll find belief structures about yourself that are from well before you have conscious memory, right? But those belief structures around your self-conception really are what we talk about, like when we talk about identity. And so when I work with clients in my containers, my programs, part of what we do is we have to look at those identity belief structures and move them to be bigger if we want a bigger life. So anyways, so this is belief structures, like 101, how beliefs are formed, what to do with them, how to observe them. I think that's it. So next episode, we're going to talk about judgments, conditions, expectations. All right. So that's what we're going to be working on next time. All right. I love you, and I will see you next week. Bye, everybody.